Imagine a black swan event. Imagine we see another corona. Imagine the stock market was to plunge and take so much liquidity that everything else gets sold off as well. Imagine gold falls as well. Imagine the bonds are falling. Imagine Bitcoin gets taken down as well. What would you do in that situation? Let's say tomorrow Bitcoin was to go down by 40%. How would you react? Think about this, because this really matters. It matters because it tells you how you are allocated with your portfolio right now. If you were to freak out, if you were to throw in the towel, if you were not to look at your portfolio at that time and hope for a recovery, then you're probably over-allocated. However, if you had some cash on the sidelines instead, and you would be buying that dip while everything is crashing so massively, then you're probably rightly allocated. So there is a balance to be made, right? On the one hand, we want to get the upside potential, so we want to get our allocation. On the other hand, we want to stay flexible for whatever scenario. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to crash like this tomorrow, but I'm saying that there is a non-zero chance. And you have to be prepared for those kinds of events. And to be prepared for it isn't even that expensive. You simply allocate to another asset class. You simply allocate to something that's not correlated to Bitcoin. You simply allocate also to stocks, maybe a bit to plain cash, maybe a bit in precious metals, right? Of course, in a crash like Corona, everything contracts, but the size of the contraction is also dependent on how liquid the market is, how large the market is, how risky the market in general is being perceived. Crypto is still perceived as being pretty much risk on, right? It has more mathematical volatility, goes up and down more than the average. So of course, when people want to go risk off, and they sell their Bitcoin, then Bitcoin will react more to this. And this happened during Corona, right? During the Corona crash, the stock market only went down by 20 to 30%. Bitcoin went down more than double of that.
This video is sponsored by the Premium membership. I never take any money from any crypto project. I never take any affiliate links from centralized exchanges. I never pump and dump coins. Instead, I offer valuable tutorials in the Premium membership. Feel free to check it out.
And so here's something a lot of people don't understand. It is relatively common knowledge that Bitcoin has diminishing returns, as in the early returns, the returns of the early years were quite high. The returns nowadays aren't that high anymore. What people don't get is that the volatility does not diminish to the same degree. It does diminish somewhat, but not by a lot. In the early days, we had crashes of, say, 85%, then it went down to maybe 80%. Now the recent crash was only 75% roughly. So there is somewhat of a reduction in volatility. But relative to the reduction of the returns, that's not much, right? The risk to reward doesn't necessarily get better. The reward shrinks a lot. The risk doesn't shrink as much. In other words, I do believe that we're still going to continue to see massive crashes. We will still continue to see crashes from the all-time high of 50 or 60%. I strongly believe this, even with the Bitcoin ETF demand. Because once people think that we're going to simply go straight up from here, then there's usually so much leverage in the market that leverage at some point needs to get flushed out. There are so many financial vehicles in Web3 to add leverage, right? You can deposit some collateral, you can mint stable coins against this, then you can buy even more of that asset. There's all kinds of ways. You don't even have to use Web3. You can even use just centralized exchanges. There are all kinds of products that give you leverage. And so whenever people are too optimistic, we will see corrections. And yes, the increasing market cap somewhat dampens those corrections, but by no means as large as people expect. So opportunities to buy low will come. Make sure that you're not over allocated in this current market, that you will simply just be frozen once we see that crash. Make sure you will be able to buy the dip in case it comes. Make sure that these kind of purchases will also be significant, that you're not just buying, say, 1/5 of your portfolio size, but that you can actually double down whenever we see something like this. It will happen at some point, who knows when, but we can simply just be reactive to this, right? We don't have to predict the crash. We can simply just buy the crash once we see it. If it's your first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish this regularly. I like what we very much appreciate as well. It helps the channel grow. See you next time. Cheers.